There are a few DC Comics events more forgettable than Bloodlines. What this was an attempt to modernize and adapt to the new types of characters popular in the 90s by introducing a new generation of heroes. So, DC ran an event to do that. Exactly one of those heroes got anything resembling notoriety. So the event flopped and was forgotten. I want to talk about it. More specifically, I want to talk about the failed characters and comics it spawned. The story of the event itself is not as interesting as that. With that little disclaimer out of the way, I'm going to talk about the event a little now, and more specifically, how it's put together. The event is told through annuals. This sounds like a better idea than it is. The problem is that most of these annuals are written by different people, which leaves it feeling disconnected and disjointed. The event itself is painfully long, it's padded to hell, and almost nothing interesting happens. It's almost like an event made up of the least relevant tie-ins you can imagine, but there's barely any main plot there to hold it together. Anyway, the story is about a group of shape-shifting alien parasites from a pocket dimension. These aliens are very unsubtly inspired by xenomorphs and had such little attention paid to them that they don't even have a species name. They're just Bloodlines parasites. They drink people's spinal fluid, and this has an occasional side effect of activating dormant metagenes, giving the people superpowers. If that doesn't happen, they die. Also, they can transform into people. The group of superpowered people that gain powers this way are called New Bloods. Also, the process of becoming a New Blood messes with your memory, except when it doesn't. If you're curious, the parasites are named Slod, who dies in the first issue of the event. Lobo blows him up. Glonth, Praetor, Angon, Venev, Lysic, and Gemir. There is no pronunciation guide for this, and it will probably change later in this video. The parasites might have some vague connections to the Seven Deadly Sins. There are some points where it seems like that's kind of intentional and some points where it's not. I don't think it is, and I'm just kind of going to chalk that up to the disconnected and disjointed stuff from the format. When I originally planned this out, this section here was supposed to be a recap of the story. And then I read Bloodlines. The story is not interesting. It would be hard to summarize this book because it's basically the aliens escape their dimension, then they go to Earth and wander around for like 20 issues and just bite people, and then the superheroes learn about it and then they team up to stop them, but the aliens reveal this bigger alien called the Taker, which beats the heroes except for Superman, and the New Bloods bail out the heroes and win the day. There's not much of a story here, and most of the event doesn't matter to the rest of the event. The characters were the reason I wanted to do this, so I'm going to talk about them, and then I'm going to talk about the books launched featuring those characters. With that out of the way, I'd like to get to the meat of the video, which is the New Bloods themselves. I'm going to be talking about them in mostly alphabetical order. There is going to be a few sets that will be paired with the first character in that set alphabetically, but other than that, it's alphabetical. There is, as far as I can tell, a single New Blood who is not a part of Bloodlines. It is a minor character from an Outsiders comic from 2010. He is also very obscure. I'm not going to be talking about him because I already have enough. The other thing I'd like to say here is that a lot of these New Bloods don't exactly have a lot to them. Most of them don't appear very much, so there isn't a whole lot to say. Some of them have pretty good story hooks, in my opinion, but almost all of those hooks don't amount to anything. The one successful character of Bloodlines I'm going to talk about here real quick because I don't intend on talking about him later. That is Tommy Monahan, the Hitman. He debuted in Demon Annual 2 and has X-ray vision and telepathy. He is a hitman, as the name suggests, had a 60-ish issue solo book, written by Garth Ennis. I was not that enthused by it because I'm not a huge Garth Ennis fan, although I will say this is probably my favorite Garth Ennis book of all the ones I've read. If you like Garth Ennis books and you aren't familiar with this, it might be worth checking out. If not, you might like it and also might be worth checking out. Debuting in New Titans Annual 9, the first new blood is Anima. She is a girl from New Orleans named Courtney Mason. She goes out to party after stealing her father's credit cards, but eventually gets abducted and attacked by the parasites. And she wakes up with no memory and starts going by Anima. She can summon an energy being called Animus and has kind of poorly explained energy powers. She's also into the alternative music, specifically grunge, of the time. There's more to her a little bit, but I'll more talk about that when I talk about her solo series, which is the second longest Bloodlines series at 16 issues. She eventually dies in Faces of Evil Prometheus. She is a member of the Second Blood Pack and gets chopped in half by a portal. Like many Bloodlines characters, I don't have particularly strong thoughts about Anima. Her powers are cool, I guess, but as we will get to later, her lore is a mess. Argus is introduced in Flash Annual 6. His name is Nick Kovac or Nick Kelly. Nick Kovac is his actual name, but he's a federal agent who's undercover in a gang and goes by Nick Kelly. After one member of the gang finds him out and brings him to a secluded location, he gets attacked by Glonth and Venev, the latter of whom is the one who turns him into a new blood. From this, he gets enhanced vision and the ability to turn invisible in darkness. He then scrounges up a costume and investigates a rival gang who he thinks is behind the attack on him. Then he and the Flash team up to fight the parasites and save Linda Park, who they have captive. To be honest, his debut issue is one of the stronger ones. It's pretty good. It actually gave me an idea of what his character was about. This sounds like an extremely low bar. And trust me, it is. That is the level Bloodlines is on. He would go on to appear sporadically in Flash comics. He still actually occasionally makes appearances. He appeared earlier in 2025 in the Question miniseries, which is something that makes him the second most recently appearing New Blood after Hitman, who appeared in the New History of the DC Universe 3. I think he has the potential to be a fun supporting Flash character, and I think it would be nice if he got used more. Ballistic is introduced in Batman Annual 17. He is a SWAT member in the GCPD named Kelvin Mao. In this issue, John Paul Valley, or Azrael, who is Batman at the time, encounters Angon. This results in the GCPD telling officers not to engage when they see her. Kelvin does, meanwhile, have some stuff going on. It is mostly due to one of his coworkers being very racist toward him. He contemplates quitting, but decides against it. Then his team gets called to a place Angon is attacking. They decide to engage, and Angon kills all of them except for him. While recovering in a hospital, he grows an exoskeleton. This gives him enhanced strength, durability, night vision, and agility. Once he gets out, he starts putting together homemade guns to hunt Angon. Then he teams up with Batman to fight her off. We also learn he's a Republican here. He'd go on to join the Blood Pack, which is the big superhero team that spun out of this event. He'd then show up occasionally after that, before dying in Infinite Crisis 7 when he and most of the original Blood Pack are vaporized by Superboy Prime's heat vision. They would later be resurrected to fight Superboy Prime and Blackest Night. Personally, I don't have any particularly strong thoughts on Ballistic. Of all of the characters, he is one of the most just kind of there. Debuting in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight Annual 3, we have our first of two character pairs. This one is Cardinal Sin, Perry Dennison, a priest. He's one of the two villains introduced in Bloodlines. And his half-brother, Luke Hames, a murderer. He becomes Samaritan. These two are thematic opposites. This issue starts with Perry and his brother Luke. Luke is holding him and two kids hostage. Perry is a priest and he's nice. Luke is a former convict and murderer and he is evil. Gamir interrupts the hostage situation, sucking both of them, but the kids escape. This experience changes the men. Perry starts to believe in evil, it's immediate and it's comical. He kills two officers who are trying to arrest Luke. One officer, he attempts to murder the other. Luke, his murderer brother, is horrified by this. Luke has healing powers, and in contrast, Perry has vague energy sucking powers. Perry hitchhikes to Gotham with a woman who runs a costume shop and makes himself a terrible costume. In contrast to Perry, Luke starts believing in good. He gets on a bus to Gotham to stop Perry. He obviously gets seen doing this, and this causes Azrael and the GCPD to start investigating. Luke gets arrested the second the bus stops. Azrael gets him away from the murderous cops, and then Azrael gets shot and takes him to the Batcave, where Luke's powers save his life. Then they team up to save the bishop Perry wants to kill. Perry almost succeeds, but Luke saves him. Then he and Perry activate their powers on each other, burning them out. This causes Perry to go looking for Gamir again. This issue is bad. It's the worst Danny O'Neill comic I have ever read. I don't like either of these characters, and these are the only Bloodlines characters to appear in this single issue and nothing else. Debuting in Robin Annual 2, Channelman and Razor Sharp are the second pair of New Bloods. These two are members of the Cyber Rats, a group of data thieves for hire. Channelman is Carter Channel, Razor Sharp is Raylene Sharp. What happens in this issue is they attempt to break into Wayne Tower so they can tap a communication satellite. Robin stops them, so they go to the person who hired them to do this with nothing. He decides to kill them, and one of the four cyber rats, Megabiter, dies here. This is his only appearance. Carter and Ray escape one way, while the fourth member of the team, Hack Rat, escapes a different way. Carter and Ray then encounter Venev, who sucks them. Hackrat rescues them before they get captured by police. Carter becomes a digital entity. His body is in a coma, but his mind can go between devices. Razor Sharp gets the ability to turn her hands into swords. Later, she gets the ability to turn her feet into swords, too. Then they team up with Robin and stop the guy who was hiring them. Channelman kinda doesn't matter to the grander scheme of things, but Razor Sharp is one of the more pushed characters of Bloodlines. She joins the Blood Pack later, and eventually she dies in Infinite Crisis 7, vaporized by Superboy Prime. I'm not a huge fan of either of these. I think Channelman is honestly a little more interesting, but the concept of the team is more interesting than the concept of the characters. I think Data Thieves for Hire is an interesting villain. I don't think this executes that premise very well. Chimera debuts in Teen Titans Annual 1. Her name is Sanjeet Bhatia, a presumably high school age student. She is an Indian immigrant to the United States. The issue starts with some of the Teen Titans fighting Angon. Then, one of them, Redwing, goes to a school dance where she sees Sanjeet. Sanjeet is supposedly on drugs and steals her father's car, driving it away. Then she crashes into Glonth, who sucks her. After a brief scuffle with Glonth, Redwing takes Sanjeet to the hospital. There, she falls into a supposedly drug-induced coma and activates her vaguely defined reality-warping powers that might be magical and traps Dagon into an illusion of Oz. The Team Titans then figure out about the parasites using some information from the Titans and that her powers have awakened, so they seek out her ex-boyfriend, assuming he's the reason she was on drugs. I'm not entirely sure why they're doing this. He broke up with her because she was on drugs. Then she starts to get maybe suicidal in her warping. Mirage rushes in to stop her. Sanjeet traps her in a weird rapey vision and then tries to kill herself harder. Meanwhile, Dagon and Kilowatt have been on a quest to find the supplier of drugs, even beyond the boyfriend. And they track this to Sanjeet's father, who is also abusive. Then they take her parents to her. Sanjit wants to kill her father, but her mother talks her down. Her father gets arrested, and Sanjit goes on to appear in 2 more issues of Teen Titans. In these, she helps the people of Korak, a fictional country on the Persian Gulf, after Cheshire nuked them. She is attacked by monsters, and the Teen Titans help her. Honestly, she's not the most interesting character. She honestly gets more interesting and more stuff to her in her later appearances that I think she does in her first. Edge debuts in Superman the Man of Steel Annual 2. He's Thomas O'Brien, a high school dropout who is attempting to support his family. After getting attacked by Angon, he awakens in a pile of bodies with little memory, and his metagene awakens, and that lets him sprout blades from his body, and he can shoot these off. He very reasonably thinks he's responsible for the pile of bodies and goes on the run. Then a series of events happens that leads to him and Steel fighting Angon, and after that he decides to stay with his family, and his younger brother dubs him Edge. Honestly, he doesn't really get a lot. Most of the issue is focused on Steel, and he is arguably the least memorable New Blood. I actually forgot he existed sometime between the point I read this issue and I started recording. Geist debuts in Detective Comics Annual 6. He's an accountant named Dwayne Gayer who gets bitten by Pretor while leaving his job at a chemical manufacturer. He gains the ability to turn invisible in the light. When he's in darkness, he is perfectly visible. There is a little more to it, but those are the basics. From there, he spends a little time figuring that out, and then goes back to work to retrieve his car, finds out his coworkers don't like him, and helps Harvey Bullock, Renee Montoya, Stan Kitch, and John Paul Valley fight Praetor. He would go on to become a member of the Blood Pack. Like most of them, he dies in Infinite Crisis 7. I like him, though. He's fun, and he's got a fun personality in his few appearances. One of the more notable New Bloods, Gunfire, is first introduced in Deathstroke the Terminator Annual 2. His name is Andrew Van Horn. He's the heir of industrialist Gunther Van Horn. Gunther produces weapons and does not like Andrew's ecologically minded project proposals. What happens in this issue is Deathstroke's suit gets damaged, so he goes to a facility in Paris owned by Gunther, who he knows, in order to get it repaired. Meanwhile, Venev sees him get on the plane, so she hops on that plane as well to look for him. Venev then sucks both Andrew and Gunther. Andrew then later wakes up, finds his father's corpse, suits up in military gear, and goes hunting. He sees Deathstroke, and using his new powers that let him basically turn anything into a gun, he fights them. Then Venev shows up and they team up and fight Venev. He gets an ongoing after Bloodlines ends, but we'll talk about that later. He would go on to appear in a few other things. In his last pre-Flashpoint appearance, he is a member of the Second Blood Pack and gets his hands chopped off by Prometheus. Then he would appear again in Heroes in Crisis. He dies here until it's revealed that nobody actually died in Heroes in Crisis. He's also got a cameo in the 2025 Superman movie, of all things. Andrew is probably the second most notable New Blood. That's not really all that much of an achievement, but it is kind of impressive, I guess. I think he is fun. I think he's got interesting powers and a decent enough backstory and characterization. He is a character I think a talented writer could do a lot with. Hook debuts in Green Arrow Annual 6. He's Kieran Masterson, a blind and hook-handed homeless Vietnam veteran. Yes, that does mean he's in his 40s. In this issue, Lissett goes to Seattle. After doing some superheroics, Oliver Queen goes to a charity ball where he meets her. They flirt for a while, but Ollie eventually leaves to investigate her murders. This prevents him from getting sucked. Kieran is one of the casualties of this. In his encounter, he tells Lissett his story, which is he fell in love with a Vietnamese woman and then was injured in the evacuation at the end of the war, resulting in his blindness and the loss of his hand. He attempted to get her and her family out during that evacuation, but he never actually found out what happened to them. It's shown that they probably died in an explosion, though. Anyway, he ends up in the morgue, but returns to life with a weird energy version and the ability to modify his hook using energy. He would appear a total of 3 times. In his third and final appearance, he is a member of the Second Blood Pack and is shot dead while fighting Prometheus. Honestly, he's one of the new bloods I like more. I could see how a story using him could be really good, but the problem there is that he'd be probably too old in the modern day. Jam is introduced in Legion of Superheroes Annual 4. He is never given a real name, he just goes by Jam. He's a skateboarder from the 20th century who gets attacked by Angon. Angon was being pursued by Timberwolf, a member of the Legion who is in the past for a reason I don't know. Anyway, when the Legion retrieves Timberwolf and brings him back to the future, Angon and Jam come along for the ride. Jam, there, awakens powers that let him tell anyone what to do. He uses these to send Angon back into the past, and then goes around in the future sexually harassing and annoying people. Eventually, the Legion gets so fed up with him, they send him back to the past. I'm not really going to bother much with this. Jam is the least likable new blood. I get the impression that that is probably intentional, and he doesn't go on to appear in anything ever again. Joe Public, no real name ever given, is introduced in Batman Shadow of the Bat Annual 1. He's a gym teacher who interferes in one of Batman's investigations. Batman rightfully chews him out for messing everything up and letting a drug kingpin escape. Almost immediately after, Batman teams up with an obscure Gotham vigilante called Pagan to investigate Gemir, who is the parasite responsible, and their killings. Then Gemir abducts the drug kingpin and Joe and takes them to an island where they're holding, victims and potential future victims. There, Joe gets sucked and then fights Gemir off. His power set allows him to drain strength from others to strengthen himself. It seems like he's retiring at the end of the story, but he doesn't. Joe would later go on to appear very rarely in Batman books. I actually own this issue physically. I have read it multiple times, and I could not for the life of me remember either the story or Joe. I think that speaks to everything about this character, quite frankly. Killrock first appears in the first issue of the Loose Cannon mini, and has 2 other appearances. The first is a cameo in a random Green Lantern issue, and the second is a cameo in 2018's Justice League of America 29, which is a book that was weirdly good for Bloodlines stuff and will come up again later. He may or may not be a fanatical serial killer who wants to kill all non-New Bloods. He is the least consequential New Blood, and that is an extremely low bar. The trio of Krag, Slingshot, and Shadowstrike first appeared in Justice League America Annual 7. This trio is not the focal New Bloods of the issue, so they don't have a lot to them. I don't even think they're in more than half the issue. What they do is they team up with the Justice League to fight the parasites and get revenge. The first member, Krag, his name was Peter Kranick. He was a machine shop foreman who got transformed. He basically became the Thing. He doesn't have a sense of touch. The second member is Slingshot. She's technically the second Slingshot. The first is an obscure Green Arrow villain. Her powers are, and this is the explanation the comic basically gives, she can accelerate things and control their direction while it happens. She is never given a backstory or a name. The third member is Shadowstrike. He is the one with the least going on and the fewest appearances. His backstory is that his parents and sister were ripped apart in front of him. He was sucked and then awakened vague shadow or energy blast powers. He was also never given a real name. These 3 are the most pointless New Bloods. They are given less than nothing. Layla is a member of Legion, which is a space organization in the present that is not to be confused with the Legion of Superheroes. She debuts in Lobo Annual 1, which is the first issue of Bloodlines. She participates in the initial investigation of the spacecraft that the parasites are on, and is in the process of being sucked when Lobo kills Slod. This results in her losing her memories, and her only noticeable new power is the ability to survive in space without the use of a spacesuit. She stayed with the Legion afterwards and was present in their annual, and then also appeared in a few other Legion-related comics. I think I should also mention that the people killed in this annual, the people the parasites base their human appearances on, she and Lobo are two of the 4 survivors. She's not really that impactful of a character. Both of her big appearances in this event are focused on introducing the parasites or on broader parasite lore. She doesn't really leave much of an impression as a result and comes out fairly bland. Lionheart is introduced in Justice League International Annual 4. He's a British dock worker turned government agent named Richard Plant. He's a Plantagenet. He's also vaguely xenophobic. He and the trio of Tasmanian Devil, Elongated Man, and Metamorpho fight a little and then work together to track down the trio of Glonth, Gemir, and Praetor who are in London. Then the parasites break into the JLI's British headquarters, and the 4 fight them off, but not well before Richard gets sucked. It's not clear what power he got from his sucking. This only makes him dubiously a new blood. He'd go on to sporadically appear in Justice League books, very, very rarely. I personally don't like him very much. He doesn't have a whole lot going on. Loose Cannon debuted in Action Comics Annual 5. He's Eddie Walker, a Metropolis police officer who was injured in a car crash while acting like a loose cannon, hence the name. And now he has to use crutches to walk and has been transitioned into a desk job. This character is rather unsubtly inspired by the Hulk. Personally, he might be my favorite of the New Bloods, and most of that's down to this first issue. He does a pretty good job of actually giving you something to care about. The story starts with him attempting suicide after work. This is interrupted by Maggie Sawyer calling him and telling him she's got a case for him. This case involves him going back out onto the street, which is what he wants. This is him investigating the murders of the homeless people the trio of Lysick, Praetor, and Glonth are feeding on. Eventually, he encounters Lysick's disguised form, and while talking to her, is sucked from behind by Glonth. While he's out, Lysick attempts to feed on Eradicator, who knocks her out. When Eddie comes to, he's tall, blue, missing memories, and right in front of an unconscious Lysick in her human form. It's later revealed that as he gets angrier, he turns red and then eventually white. They come to blows over Lysick. Eddie wants to question her, and Eradicator wants to imprison her. Eddie also steals some clothes from a store, since he's naked. During this, Eddie sees Maggie, who reminds him of who he is. Then Eddie and Eradicator team up to fight the trio of parasites. Eddie manages to convince Eradicator to help save people since their fight did destroy a bridge. Then he goes home, destroys the gun he was going to shoot himself with, and discovers that he transforms back into his non-Hulk form in daylight. I'm pretty sure this restriction would be gone by the time he gets a mini, which happens later, and I will talk about later. Eddie actually has pretty good longevity for a Bloodlines character. He's actually appeared as recently as November of 2024 and was in a backup story a little bit before that. That's one of the more recent appearances for a Bloodlines character, although it wasn't a thing with a lot of other Bloodlines characters. Loria first appears in the Ballistic story in Showcase 9412. She has metal skin and razor hair and is never given a name or backstory. I think she's meant to be a bit of a mystery, but I don't really have to tell you that this goes almost nowhere. The story actually has Ballistic going to Blood Pack tryouts, and Loria is introduced when he gets sidetracked in an attempt to talk down a hostage situation between an abusive husband and wife, who are both also going to Blood Pack tryouts. She shows up and recklessly makes things worse. Ballistic is actually initially attracted to her, but it quickly wears off as they interact. Then he goes to Blood Pack tryouts. The team is formed at the end of the issue, and they both make the team. There's not really that much more to the story or to Loria. She's a belligerent asshole. Then she dies in Blood Pack 4. Nobody really seems to care that much, and this isn't that surprising. She was terribly unpleasant to all of them. Mongrel is the reason I decided to make this. When I was putting together my Hawkman video, I read this issue, and I remembered that Bloodlines exist, and I figured that this would be something fun to do. Anyway, Mongrel debuts in Hawkman Annual 1, if it's not obvious. His name is Joshua Zan, and he can fire energy blasts fueled by anger from his hands. This issue is non-linear. It's pretty solid, but as a result, I'm going to just tell this in roughly chronological order. It's also tied to events elsewhere in the comics. There is going to be a little bit of explanation here. It's one of the comics that is more tied to its surroundings than any other. Joshua's parents are a Cambodian woman and an African-American deserter from the Vietnam War. He just came to Cambodia instead of going back to the U.S. He gets a former colleague to smuggle his son out of the country because of Pol Pot, so Joshua goes to his grandmother in Chicago. He grows up there. He is frequently the target of the racially motivated attacks. This includes at home because after his grandmother died, he started living with his racist uncle, who is also physically abusive. Anyway, one night he ends up taking a girl from his high school to a club in Netherworld, which is a rough part of the city that's mostly inhabited by metahumans. They aren't allowed in because neither is a metahuman, so they go up on a roof and talk to each other. This gets them caught up in a fight between the Hawks and Count Viper, who is a psychic body-hopping French nobleman. Hawkwoman takes a nasty attack, and Josh goes to investigate and make sure she's okay. Months later, the girl doesn't want anything to do with him, and he drops out of school. At the same time, Hawkman starts looking for him, mostly because of what he saw with Hawkwoman. While attempting to hide and find somewhere to stay, he encounters Lysick, who shows herself and feeds on him. He does not resist this. He gets powers and runs to school, blowing it up, then goes to his uncle, ready to kill him. It is not shown whether he did. Then, since Hawkman is fighting Lysick in Daily Plaza, he goes there. He fights both her and Hawkman. He is pretty explicitly stated to be very reckless, uncaring about bystanders, and possibly suicidal in his fighting style. He also shows this in other ways, such as running into a very obvious trap, or, at the end of the issue, flooding an L tunnel with people in it so he can kill Lysick. He managed to survive this, and went on to join the Blood Pack and become a supporting character for the rest of the 1993 Hawkman book. I feel like I should mention he's also kind of involved in the Hawk fusion later in this run. He is also implied to have bad hygiene in Blood Pack 1. Later in the series, there is a line that suggests he raps as well. The comic refers to it as mobster rap. He is one of the many casualties of Infinite Crisis 7, and in case you can't tell, I actually like him a lot. I think he is a pretty solid concept that you could do a lot with. Myriad first appears in Superman 77. This is a unique case as she is the only new blood who appears before the annual where she gets her powers. That annual would be Superman Annual 5. Her name is Sasha Green, and she's a martial arts instructor. Or was, rather. She worked for Lex Luthor, and he had her killed after she knocked him down in front of Lois Lane and Supergirl, who laughed at him as a result. Her corpse was put into a landfill where it was bitten by Gemir. This returned the corpse to life with psychic powers. Whenever she touches someone, she takes on their memories, skills, and lives, absorbing aspects of the people she touches. She gets the memories of a middle-aged woman, a gang member, her original martial artist life, and an assassin. It's a decent concept, but I think I'm a little biased against it because I really didn't like her annual. I can see how someone would like this, but I personally don't. Nightblade is Nick Mayak, a Chinese-American who, while in the hospital, got fed on by Lysick, awakening a strong healing factor. He debuts in Green Lantern Annual 2. Prior to his healing factor coming in, he had been paralyzed for a long time. It's not entirely clear if this is the reason he's in the hospital, but this happened in a car accident that killed his race car driver father. His healing factor restores the use of his legs, and he gets discovered by a doctor and nurse who are some of the few people Lysick didn't kill. He gets discharged, so he goes home to find his mother, uncle, and sister who have been slaughtered by Lysick. He decides he's not going to leave this to the police and starts investigating on his own. He starts his investigation by going to his neighbor's house to ask if his neighbor saw anything. Immediately, a bunch of men come out of the house and chop off his arm. He runs away and the arm regenerates, but the men chase him. Then he and Hal Jordan team up to fight them off. What's happening here is that Lysick is targeting married women, killing the women, and then mind-controlling and empowering their husbands so they serve her. She attempts to do this to Hal, but he breaks out of it. Then Nick and Hal fight the husbands. The men escape, and Nick learns his uncle is among them. This doesn't go anywhere. This is also the only time any parasite does anything like this. I like it though. This is some of the most planning done by any of the parasites, which I really like. Most of the time, they're pretty interchangeable and boring. The only one who has like any particularly strong characterization is Glonth, who is the fat one and therefore a stupid glutton. Similarly, this issue actually attempts to characterize Nick, which is nice. It makes comparisons to Hal, who even outright states they're kind of similar. Nick would be a member of the Blood Pack later on, appearing in its self-titled book, and also in a few other random comics as a member of the team. In that Blood Pack book, he's mentioned to have made music that is described as teen pop ballads. He's also in Limbo and Superman Beyond, #1, as are several other New Bloods, although we'll only talk about it here. That is his most recent appearance. He dies in Infinite Crisis 7, with most of the rest of the Blood Pack, although I will say that if any member of the Blood Pack survived, it would probably be him. Nobody had any interest in him, though, so he's dead. Personally, he's one of the New Bloods I like more. I think he's shown to be a potentially interesting character in his debut issue, which sort of carries over to Blood Pack. Pax is introduced in Legion Annual 4. He is the sole non-parasite survivor of the dimension the parasites originally came from. In this issue, Lobo, Viral Docs, Layla, Lady Quark, Captain Comet, and a bunch of random people go to investigate the location where the parasite's ship was first encountered. This is in a largely empty and small dimension filled with perpetually burning planets. They're attacked by a mysterious tentacle that comes from one set of planets, and they have to land on the sole non-flaming planet to do repairs. There, they find an abandoned city with Pax inside it. He attacks them, mistaking them for the parasites. Pax was a pacifist religious leader who was repeatedly fed on by the parasites and now wants to kill them all. He's got a bomb that he intends to use to do it. Some unnamed parasites from this dimension then attack the small group with Pax. This group contains all the random people and none of the important people. Then a bigger parasite attacks. Pax intends to kill himself with the bomb, but Lady Quark manages to talk him out of it and takes him with them into the main universe. The bomb blows up, sealing the rift to the parasite's dimension. Pax then reveals he can tell where the parasites are, and the crew sets out for Earth. Pax sucks. He's basically just an exposition machine. Prism is introduced in Eclipso Annual 1. He's Linus Powell, a scientist who works with light. This specialty threatens Eclipso, who goes after him as much as possible. Eclipso manipulates Angon into going into Linus's well-defended facility to destroy it. Eclipso then possesses Angon and leaves the nuclear reactor inside the facility to melt down. Linus, who is turning to sand after being sucked, goes into the reactor to shut it down. It explodes, turning him into crystal. He ends up awakening in a field with a few other New Bloods looking down at him. They start fighting, and Linus shows off some light powers. Meanwhile, Eclipso breaks into the parasite spaceship and also sends out a lot of possessed people to cause havoc. Then he and Linus get into a fight. Linus destroys the shard of Eclipso's black diamond that was possessing Angon, freeing her. Angon flees, and the group decides to help the people harmed by Eclipso's rampage. Linus would go on to appear 3 more times in this Eclipso book. Personally, I don't think there's very much to him and don't care. Ragnarok is Gunther Van Horn, Gunfire's father. You might have heard me talk about him earlier. He first appears in Deathstroke the Terminator Annual 2 with his son, although he is not revealed to be Ragnarok until much later in Gunfire Zero, which takes place halfway through Gunfire. He doesn't really get any clear powers from Venev. There's something about immortality or resurrection. I'll talk more about him when I talk about the Gunfire ongoing. He ends up dying in Gunfire 13, and he's just kind of a really lame supervillain. Rodney James debuts in Detective Comics Annual 6. This is also his only appearance. He is a drug runner who is going to be executed by some gangsters. He gets saved by Batman, and then while running away gets sucked. He gets the ability to manipulate his body in a similar way to Plastic Man or Elongated Man. He uses this to go get revenge on the gangsters who thought he had stolen money from them. Batman stops him from killing them and sends him home. That is his entire story. He's not even the focus of the issue. Sparks first appeared in Adventures of Superman Annual 5. Her name is Donna Carol Force, or DC Force. She comes from a family of superpowered people and wants powers of her own. So, she and her uncle, who can turn into like a werewolf thing, go to Metropolis to search for one of the parasites, since they're pretty confident it's going to activate her metagene. Although they do both have a little bit of doubt about this. I actually really like this. I think it's a fun concept. Eventually, they find and fight Gamir, and Gamir sucks her. Superboy saves them, and then the paramedics arrive and attempt to save her. When she gets shocked with a defibrillator, she awakens electrical powers. Then she and Superboy fight the parasites who are doing this weird soup kitchen plot. All of them are there. Then she kisses him and leaves. Going back to her uncle, they decide to part ways, leaving her homeless in Metropolis. After the event ends, she joins the Blood Pack and would go on to be a somewhat regular supporting character in Superboy comics. She's a member of the Ravers, which are a team that Superboy is associated with. She's actually one of the Bloodlines characters with the most appearances, at being about 50. She's the only member of the Blood Pack that survives Infinite Crisis, and she's in Final Crisis even. She's also homophobic, but if you ignore that, I think she's a pretty fun character with a lot of potential. Terrasmith is introduced in Justice League America Annual 7. He is Jack Mobley sometimes and John Mobley sometimes. Mobley is a programmer with terminal pancreatic cancer. Even before that, though, his life was on the downturn. His wife and daughter had already left him. He's got a very big tendency to blame others for his problems. Eventually, he attempts to sleep with the disguised Lysick, who sucks him, then Venev does as well. Eventually, Mobley wakes up with no memory. He just remembers the fact that he hated the people on TV. In this case, that's the Justice League. He is attacked by his landlord as he leaves his place, who mistakes him for one of the parasites. In self-defense, he chokes the man, activating his powers. His powers let him transform people into their worst fears. As he regains more of his memory, he goes to the doctor, and there he learns that he's been completely transformed, and the cancer is gone, but he might not be human anymore. Then he gets angry at the doctor, and then transforms him and the nurse. This results in him going on a transformation spree outside. After a bit of this, he decides to hide at his ex-wife's place. There, he begs for her to divorce her new husband and live as a family again. She declines, and he transforms her husband, and his daughter. After a bit of time there, he learns that the Justice League is holding a public event. This is an attempt to trap the parasites. Terrasmith decides to attack that event, but this just kind of fails because he can't control his monsters. And it also wears off eventually. So he just leaves the city, and then there's some text saying that he might become a hero or a villain. This doesn't go anywhere, but it's probably villain. He would show up much later in an issue of Justice League of America, the same book that had Kilrock in it. This is where his name changed, actually. What happens in this issue is he breaks into a museum that's holding Glonth's skull in order to retrieve it. This makes Glonth the parasite with, I believe, the second most recent appearance, and one of two that appeared post-Flashpoint. The other is, I think, unnamed, but probably Praetor, who appeared in a Green Lantern book. As for Terrasmith himself, he's okay, I guess. I don't have any particularly strong feelings about him. He kind of sucks, but, I think that's intentional. The characters out of the way, I'd like to talk about the few books that did spin out of Bloodlines. Most of them were minis that didn't last very long, except for Hitman, which, again, I'm not really going to talk about. I am going to talk about all the other books, though. To be honest, I'm mostly doing this for completion's sake. I don't really have a lot to say about most of them. There's generally not a lot here. I also feel like I should mention that a lot, but not all, of these books came out a year or so after the event ended, so they were really striking while the iron was ice cold. Showcase 94 isn't technically a Bloodlines book, but it's got a lot of New Bloods material, so I'm going to talk about it. Of the 12 issues, 9 of them have New Blood stories. Most of these are prequels to their ongoings. They tend to be pretty short and don't have as much substance. As a result, I'll be breezing through these. Issues 1 and 2 have a gunfire story. The first issue has him sparring with one of his supporting cast, and then recounting his origin. Then a villain named Dominion and her minions break into his building, and he fights them. This sets up the second issue story, which is him stopping them. Issues 3 and 4 have a cyber rat story. This story has them taking a job to break into a heavily fortified tower. Predictably, things go wrong. Then it turns out that they were just hired by the person who owned the tower in order to test its security. This is mostly just passable action sequences. Issue 5 has a loose cannon story. In this, he goes to the bank. The bank gets robbed and he attempts to stop it. It fails, and he gets locked in the vault. When night falls, he breaks out of the vault and beats up the robber. This is bookended by Eddie meeting a kid who lives in his building and is being bullied by his brother. Eddie tells the kid that he needs to stand up for himself and talk to his brother. Issue 6 has a Spark story. In it, she goes to visit one of her relatives in New Orleans. That relative goes by Allure. Allure is a 4-time widow, and she's rapidly becoming rich because of that. Sparks went to see her because Allure is an outcast, and Donna wants to become a superhero, which her family frowns upon, which would also make her an outcast. They all go out to dinner, and then Captain Boomerang tries to rob them. Sparks greatly underestimates him and loses, so Allure has to save her. This leads Sparks to the realization that Allure did in fact murder her husbands, which Allure denies. This is never followed up on. Issue 7 has a Terrorsmith story. In it, he gets abducted by an obscure Justice League villain named Brainstorm, who wants to regain his powers using Terrorsmiths. Terrorsmith just uses his powers to escape. This is the least interesting story in any of these issues. Issue 9 has a Pax story. This issue has Pax recapping his backstory. And then he goes to a space station near where the rift to the parasite dimension was. There he encounters 3 parasites, kills them, and then says there's more out there and goes out to kill more parasites. I'm pretty sure this is his last appearance. Finally, issue 12 has a ballistic story. I talked about it during the Loria section. The basic recap is that it's a brief adventure that introduces a new blood and sets up the blood pack ongoing. Alright, this is a real quick editing insert because I missed a book. There is an Argus story. It's 2 parts. It's in Showcase 95. I only found it when I was looking for images of Argus. In this book, Argus fights someone who made a device to dissolve clothes so he could perv on women. The guy is the son of an arms dealer and uses that to get out of punishment. Then Argus's clothes dissolve on live TV, and there's a comment that implies he has a large penis. Then he gets a new costume and destroys her weapons. At the end of the event, he gets rid of the new costume and just goes back to his old one. My thoughts on this are more or less the same as the Showcase 94 ones. This book is way too short to have any sort of impact. There is not much to it. Loose Cannon is a 4-issue mini written by Jeff Loeb and drawn by Adam Polina. This book is very 90s, and it is mostly just him fighting things. There's barely anything to say about it. There's not that much of a story here. He just kind of has a fight, then fakes his death and runs away with a waitress. Then he has another fight where that waitress gets injured, so he takes her to the hospital. Then there's another fight, and he tells his identity to Maggie Sawyer and the waitress, who is probably meant to be his love interest. The book even ends with a not the end. It was the end. It was very much the end. This book is bad, and it has no substance, and it's not even bad in a funny way. Cyber Rats had a 3-issue book as well. It's by Chuck Dixon and Michael Dukowitz. This book has them stealing a top-secret formula from an elderly man and his granddaughter. And the owner of this formula, a man named Branchwater, wants it back. So he teams up with the guy who tried to kill them in their first appearance. They try to hunt him down. In the process, they kill Channelman's body, stranding him in the digital world. Then they find this out. While the other 2 fight mercenaries, they torture him by putting him in telenovelas. The team finds out that the formula includes water from a mythical North African well in a fictional country. So they go there, Find out the formula is for an addictive soda because the mythical well water is addictive. And then there's a fight that destroys the well and they leave. This book is fun. It's nothing special, but it is like a simple, relatively solid 3-part adventure. It's probably the best looking of the Bloodlines spin-offs. It's very pretty. The third longest Bloodlines book is Gunfires. It was 14 issues long, with writing by Len Wein and art by Steve Irwin. This book more or less just has him fighting some people until it turns out his aunt, who is one of his supporting characters, wants him to step down, and he kind of deals with that for a bit. And then he finds out his dad is alive, and it kind of just starts dealing with that full time, with the occasional bit of side character drama that derails the book a little. Eventually, it turns out that Ragnarok, his father, wants to devastate the world for some reason, and Gunfire can't stop it himself, so he calls the Justice League. They beat Ragnarok, but it's stated that Van Horn Industries is going to go under because of this. This caused a lot of controversy because they are very clearly involved in this, and it's also heavily implied that Gunfire is going to join the Justice League. I don't think that ever happened. This book is fine. It's not bad. It's not amazing. It's honestly kind of a just really conventional superhero comic with very little twists on the formula. I wouldn't seek it out, but if you're interested, you might as well give it a shot, I guess. The second longest Bloodlines book is Anima. It lasted 16 issues. It was written by Elizabeth Hand and Paul Whitcover with art by Steve Crespo. This is probably my least favorite book of the lot. I personally didn't think it was all that interesting, and quite frankly, I also don't think it was terribly memorable. The book is weird. Anima runs away from home and starts up like squatting with a band in Gotham, and then they move around a bit, and then eventually it just completely changes to being about the book's lore. Anima's energy being that she can summon, is got so much lore. Oh my god. I wrote like a ton of it out here, but I don't want to read it because it's so complicated and it's not delivered very well. It's kind of hard to follow, in my opinion. They fight this thing called the Nameless One, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. That's what my notes say. I don't know if it's right because I don't remember this book well. And they win and stuff happens, and all of this lore stuff just kind of sidetracks the actually interesting bits. It is by far the least interesting part of the comic. The family and drama bits are far stronger than the mystical bits, and I don't think this is a great book if it's not obvious. I did not enjoy it very much. I can see how someone might. I wouldn't go out of your way to read it, but if you really want to, it's not the worst thing you can read. Also, as a little bonus fun fact, the 2008 version of the DC Comics Encyclopedia, a book I have for some reason, the picture they use for Anima is actually not of her. It is of one of her supporting characters, a lesbian with HIV named Liv instead. The Blood Pack has a 4-issue miniseries as well. This was written by Charles Moore with art by Christopher Taylor. This book has the titular team put together for a reality TV show. It consists of Ballistic, Mongrel, Loria, Sparks, Geist, Nightblade, and Razorsharp. The team also has Alan Scott's daughter Jade as a trainer and advisor. Geist is only on the team via a clerical error, as a little fun thing. Nobody on production wanted him to be there because he is invisible, and television is a visual medium. The show, of course, is a trap. It's the Quorum, a group that is not very well explained in this book, and I think originates from a Green Lantern book. They are intergalactically connected people who want to study the New Bloods by having them in one place, hence the house the team lives in with all these armed guards, and study them. And then there's this story with a whole bunch of twists and turns. I can't really summarize it that well. I'm not really going to try. They basically just kind of do some stuff, find out the people are evil, go find and stop the people. Mongrel joins the quorum for like a minute because he thinks the poorly defined things that they're doing are going to happen anyway. But he comes back to the Blood Pack side. And then after that, all happens. Geist and Razorsharp leave. Geist because he's mad about the clerical error being the only reason he's on the team, and Razorsharp because she didn't like the fame that came with it. Nightblade and Ballistic ask for Jade to lead a new incarnation of the team, and Sparks hugs Mongrel. Neither thing goes anywhere. There's like another fun little touch here, which is there's some text sections at the end of each issue. This is where Mongrel rapping and Nightblade's pop ballads first come up. It's also Geist's clerical error. That's where that first comes up. Some other fun things from these include a dispute over the rights to the image of Superboy, Ballistic getting rejected as a spokesman for the fictional version of the NRA because he looks mnemonic, a fictional animated kids show on them got licensed, and Mongrel wrote a kind of weird letter to the girl from his origin story. It's got fun little characterization and world building bits. I like them a lot. In case it's not immediately obvious, I quite liked Blood Pack. Honestly, in some ways, I think this book is ahead of its time a little. This was before the really big reality TV boom, I think. It's not anything special writing quality-wise, but I think I like the concept more than that. And I think that's why I like it so much. I feel like the concept of a superhero reality TV show is something you get a lot of mileage out of. I'm almost certain someone else has done it, but I can't think of an example off the top of my head. The final Bloodlines title is a 6-issue Argus mini. It's written by Mark Wheatley and Alan Gross and has art by Phil Hester. I will freely admit that this was the last thing I read, so I was a little checked out by that point. This was not helped by that comic being very wordy. I don't have a lot to say about this one compared to its length. I wasn't a huge fan, but I don't know how much of that was just me being done with Bloodlines. I'm also of the mind that this was a little hard to follow, but again, that just might have been me needing to take a break for a couple of days. Basically, this has Argus going undercover at a company called Data Highways Incorporated, who I think are connected to the gang that he was undercover with in his debut issue. It's not entirely clear why he's there, but stuff happens. He learns that people have superpowers. He gets his eyes torn out but can still see, and they eventually regrow. And then eventually Data Highways launches a satellite that can be used to spy or broadcast. And then he learns a little bit about the satellite. He fights a robot. He finds out the love interest was really the mastermind, and he lets her go. I'm not entirely sure what her plan was, but I am willing to chalk that up to just me not being the most attentive while reading. This book's okay. It's nothing special. If you really like Argus, it's worth a read, I guess. But I don't think there's anyone that really likes Argus. Finally, I would also like to say that there is a Bloodlines book from 2016. It was written by J.T. Krull with art by V. Ken Marion. This book reframes it as a slightly more conventional alien invasion horror story. This doesn't really appear to be canon, and it's very, very far past the original event, so I'm not really going to get into it. I did read it, but I don't have much to say. It's pretty forgettable. If you think of an alien invasion story that takes place in a small town and features high schoolers as a prominent part of the main cast, you've pretty much got the plot down. It's pretty forgettable and not that interesting. That's mostly it for Bloodlines in the modern era. The most recent New Bloods material that is even a little bit substantial is a cameo in Green Arrow's 2024 annual. There is also Gunfire and Superman, but that's a very background cameo, and you're not really going to see it unless you see the mural itself. In this issue, which I think is a fitting place for them to be, I think this makes sense. This issue, an older Ollie is telling stories. One of these stories is a one-page one that has the Parasites coming back for revenge. This page has Loose Cannon, Geist, Argus, Gunfire, Razorsharp, Anima, and Ballistic on it. Aside from Sparks and Hitman, and maybe accepting Razorsharp and Anima, I'd say these are the characters that stuck around more or less. It's not exactly a lot of stickiness, but it is better than a lot of characters. I did make a New Blood tier list, and I was debating including it or not, but I figured it'd be a nice, fun thing to close out on.